My name is Jennifer Moses and I am the National Official for the Equalities and Training Team. And what I intend to do over the next few minutes is take you through that survey questions. And I'm really grateful for those of you that responded. Take you through some of the results. Maybe take a couple of questions, but then hand over to Claire Ward, who will then introduce the panel, and hopefully some of the questions and issues that come out of the survey responses can be addressed by our panel. Are you okay with all that? That makes sense? Good. So I'll start with the first slide. Oh, that's me. Okay, so as I said, we sent the survey out. We got a fairly good response. And we particularly wanted to focus on the forthcoming general election. We know that by law, there has to be a general election take place by 2025. The noises are that this is likely to take place around November, but I'm not sure if that has changed. But we wanted to talk to you and ask you about disability rights, how you think this current government fares in terms of your lived experiences and disability rights, and what you would like the union to take forward with a new government around disability rights. So the first question that we asked was around people who are involved in general elections that have duties under the Equality Act 2010. But I am conscious, I have to say, that the Equality Act only applies to England, Wales and Scotland and not in Northern Ireland. So there is separate legislation within Northern Ireland, which is the Disability Discrimination Northern Ireland Order of 2006. So apologies, that we should have acknowledged that within this question. Within Northern Ireland, there are similar grounds for legislation in terms of promoting equality of opportunity for people with a disability and people without. So in terms of service provision, there are rights for disabled people, and they have to take reasonable adjustments. All laws right across the UK require service providers, employers, etc. to make reasonable adjustments and avoid putting people with disabilities at a substantial disadvantage. So we asked the question, have you ever experienced difficulties in voting in any elections? Thankfully, the majority of you, nearly 90% of you, said no. But I think if you've got one person who has struggled to vote, then that is a problem. So we've got nearly 6% of you said that you found polling stations inaccessible, and we'll probably have a discussion about that. But yes, there was comments around something else. So there were some additional comments that came through on this particular question. The commenting in green, the largest text there, talked about a particular situation with a ramp where someone had to actually go inside for them to actually put the ramp in place. I mean, how ridiculous is that? That is not accessible. If you have a mobility impairment, how are you able to access that place if you have to ask for that? So it's really sad to see that story there and that story from that person. Someone else saying they were unable to walk very far, so found it very difficult. Again, an inaccessible election office, or had an issue during the COVID period. So those were some of the comments that came out of that survey. I just wondered if anyone who had probably ticked there's something else who wanted to add in terms of their experience of accessing an election office. One hand over there on the left.
Yeah,
thank you.
I tick that box. For myself, it was when I was a student. I'm dyslexic, and I found that there was no help to register, to show me how to register to the vote. Right. So my period at university, I actually turned up to the polling station unaware that I had to register. I wasn't even, there was no guidance, and then the whole process of applying to vote, I wasn't able to vote on a number of occasions. My university there wasn't any support out there.
That is quite saddening, actually, because there'll be many like you who have been put off from voting as a result of the inaccessibility of the election process. So it's really important actually with a general election coming up that this union, as well as within the whole trade union movement, campaigns around making that election more accessible so that the voices and lived experiences of all disabled people in their communities are there and vote for the next government that would meet everybody's needs and that they are an inclusive government. And I've got a hand there in the middle. Thank you.
I was just going to say that I started doing postal voting. I did it with my father-in-law for him. And I just thought, well, I'll just add my name. And you don't have to be disabled or elderly to get a postal vote. So it just makes it a lot easier when you get it to your house and you just post it in a post box, if that helps at all.
Thank you for that. Be interesting to know how accessible the postal voting process is either. Whether there are, I haven't actually looked at that, so if anyone has looked at it and said there are issues. Kat, did you want to come in?
Yeah, we know that there are some issues around access to postal voting and also voter ID specifically for neurodivergent people, and there's quite a lot of evidence emerging to show that, because again it's getting that access to support. You know, it's still quite difficult to sometimes access the postal voting if you are dyslexic, and lots of other reasons that for a neurodivergent person that can be quite challenging. But also specifically around voter ID, we know that neurodivergent people are less likely to have voter ID. You can't use your disabled bus pass, yet I think, I could be wrong, but they were talking about allowing elderly people to use their bus pass, but not disabled people, which is just wrong, because that's a free ID. You know, you have to pay for your blue badge, you have to pay for a passport, you have to pay for a driving licence. There's lots of neurodivergent people that don't drive. You know, I don't have a driving licence, and a passport is £80. If you've got to choose between, and some of our disabled teachers are in these situations, you've got to choose between eating and paying to get to work. You're not going to spend £80 on a passport. So the voter ID is a massive access issue for disabled people and neurodivergent people.
Thank you for that, Kat. That is a really important point in terms of voter ID. We've got a few more hands coming up. I'll take... Can you just wait for the mic, please? Thank you. It's there.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to add to, that I don't know obviously about all councils, but Derby City Council, they have really pushed the photo ID, but they're providing it for free. So you don't have to pay for a passport. You don't have to. They've said that we will support you, anybody who wants it, to get the photo ID for free.
That's
so
really good.
I don't know about other councils.
Nationally, it's not, yeah, which is a shame. So I hope national councils follow, but I would suspect it depends who's in charge of the council. But I really hope other councils follow that. Otherwise, we have got a really big problem on our hands. But I'm so glad to see that they're doing that. That's really good to hear.
And they have really pushed it, and it is really, accessible. People do know about that in Derby, Derbyshire, Derby City.
That's really good, and thank you for that. Maybe when we start putting our information out about elections, we can name and shame councils.
Absolutely.
Councils such as yours that are doing good work, and those who are not so good in terms of making the voting process accessible. Who's next?
Sorry, I was just going to explain the postal vote that I've done. It's you just need to be registered under your property, and you need to be identified. So if you're living in your property as a person, you don't need any other photo or ID or anything like that. It comes in an envelope, and you just literally have to make sure you've registered yourself so that you can vote in time. So as long as you do that 6 months before the voting date and you request from your council a postal vote, you should be able to vote without any cost or implications. There might be a struggle posting that then, and that's the other thing. You know, not everyone has a post box nearby their homes to be able to post it, but it is pretty straightforward to fill in, and I think councils will help if you need extra help to fill it in. They do have braille ones for people with sight problems and things like that as well.
Thank
Sorry.
you. I'll take that question then, and there's just one here at the front, and then I'll move on to the next
Sorry,
question.
no, it was just another thing about voter ID. Obviously, in Northern Ireland, we've had to have ID for a long time to vote, so we can get electoral register cards that are free, so that you don't have to pay for your ID at all. So that would be something that we could maybe ask for, that it's the electoral registry office themselves that give you out the ID so that you can vote. So it's just something to look at.
Thank you. Can we just get a mic here at the front? Yeah.
Sorry, I just double-checked something, and my information was correct. People can apply for a voter authority certificate for free on the gov.uk website. So if I were the NASUWT, I would be putting out information leaflets about how to apply for a voter authority certificate in order to vote. It's free of charge, and you just do it on the gov.uk website. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. That's one of the benefits of having that information accessible. So thank you, and we will do that. That's really helpful. So the next question that we wanted to know about, anyone that's ever stood for elected office, or if you know of other disabled people who have stood for elected office, whether they've been disadvantaged by the extra costs that they may face because of standing for that election. And the results, again, predominantly no, but there were 3% who said yes, but there were more who said they were not sure, i.e. they were not sure. Was there anyone that said yes, wanted to just quickly share that experience? Again, thank you.
So I stood as a councillor for the Labour Party in 2014 in an unwinnable seat. And back then there was the Access to Elected Office fund, which was great. People could apply to central government and get a pot of money, about £200 for their campaign, but this has unfortunately been scrapped by the government. And I know for myself and for others, that the fact that that money is no longer available makes them think twice before putting themselves forward. I know the Labour Party have a local provision in place, but it isn't well advertised, and so it is a huge barrier, I think, for disabled people to stand for public office. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, Bernadetta. Yes, please, we can use that mic. Hopefully it's on.
It's not on, it's red. It's on. Oh.
It should be on now.
Yes, 2016, I stood as a councillor in Peterborough, a place called Parnwell. Well, I would say that with the Labour Party, everything was there for me, like they did all the photocopying. The only problem was canvassing. You have to walk door to door. I couldn't walk door to door because of my disability. I have mobility issues. So at times, it was family, it was everybody who was helping me to campaign. It was a good experience. We were about 5. I managed to become number 3, and I was so pleased with myself. But I didn't go through. Thank you.
Yeah, just this week, the government have released their new Disabled People's Action Plan. I'm not sure if anyone in here has seen it. They have now made a commitment to reintroduce a fund to ensure disabled people are able to run for election that will come in place after the next general election. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's like a promise that's irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting. It takes me on to the next question. I was going to discuss the action plan, the disability action plan. So the latest statistics tell us that around 1 in 5 of the UK population are thought to be underrepresented in politics at different levels of government across the UK and internationally. Obviously, I would imagine that number is much higher. because we know that the data is never up to date and there are still issues, the stigma around declaring if you have a disability. So do you feel that enough is being done to address this? In terms of the action plan that Quinn just mentioned, it has been hugely criticised by lobbying organisations such as Disability Rights UK, who argue that once again it just makes clear that this government does not think that the lives of disabled people are a priority. We will be responding to the consultation around that, and obviously will include the views that you have raised today and previous conferences around disability rights. So, not surprisingly, over 2/3 of you said no, you didn't think enough has been done to address this. 20% of you were not sure, and a very small minority of you thought that enough was being done. Maybe we can take up, if you think that the current government is doing enough to address this, maybe we can address that with the panel in the next session. But I will move on to the next question. So do you think the role of Minister for Disabled People should be standalone post in government? Shockingly, the job of Minister for Disabled People was downgraded in December last year and is now at a more junior level. The predecessor, the post was downgraded. I'm not quite sure why, what the justification was for that, but your voice, we asked this question and this is what you thought. Again, nearly 75% of you said yes, it should be a standalone position. We would also argue it has to be someone with a disability or impairment, because we fully and wholeheartedly agree with nothing about us without us. So we would be hugely campaigning against that decision that there should be a standalone minister. Again, there were 7% of you who felt no. Be interesting if anybody wants to say why they think that. If anyone wants to put their hand up why we don't think this is necessary. No pressure if you'd rather not, that's absolutely fine. And again, 17% of you said you were not sure. No, that's fine. So, in the next question relates to a particular report to the United Nations and the Equality and Human Rights Commission, who warn that many disabled people continue to face discrimination in the UK. And the situation is worsening, particularly in light of current cost of living pressures and austerity measures. So this is a really important question because this will feed into things like the consultation responses on disability rights, but also any letters or communications we're having with governments and administrations around what we would like your priorities to be for a new government after the election. So there were, I'll read them out just in case anyone's struggling to see the text. So the first one, 17% was tackling long wait times between applying for and receiving benefits. The next one, 24, nearly 25%, addressing wider problems with the welfare system. The next one, which is 29%, improving engagement with disabled people and their organisations. And then inspiring access to public services for disabled people was 23%, and there was a few that said other priorities. So the highest percentage was improving engagement with disabled people and their organisations, and I think that is a really important point. I don't know if anybody wanted to say anything about either these results or about that particular point about how we better improve the engagement with disabled people and their organisations. Thank you. Mike's on its way.
Thank you. I think it's just a case of removing the barriers. Everyone should be able to engage. We're all part of a democracy, or we should be, and it's just making sure we can all engage with the organisations and the systems and having a positive duty on government to make sure that happens.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else? Oh, that's absolutely fine. Oh, sorry, Benita. Apologies. I need to look to my left as well.
Yeah, I want to say because of the high cost of living, it's affecting everybody, and I'll speak in particular the disabled people. I've got families because of the work I do, I would say, call it self-appointed in Peterborough, where we have an organization we're helping out by giving out essentials. You find that there are young people who are going to school, they're supposed to be having Pampers because of their disability. The parents cannot afford that. The council gives them could be Pampers for a week, and yet that is used in a day. So the mother cannot afford to buy something. What do? The child then resents going to school because they feel that other students will know what's happening around her. The mother doesn't know what to do. Mental health kicks in. Therefore, they don't engage at all. Many organizations are not getting funding. Fundings have been cut, so they cannot really help. So you find that through churches, through other organizations, we bring things together and kind of support these families. That is just the disabled community, disabled people. How about other people, abled people who are also going through that? They're choosing either to either feed their children or to actually have light or have heating in their house. It's happening. Therefore, they're just as good as homeless people. Then they become ill because of the cold there. They cannot access NHS because the GP are now small gods. You can't really get them. The dentist, you can't get them because they will want to examine you through the phone, and yet you don't even have that phone. There's digital poverty. So where are we? Which government are we going to vote in if all these things are happening? No access, you have a problem, nobody to talk to, you are isolated, and if there are people to help you, there's no funding. That's where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Sorry, I've touched it again. Thank you, Bernadette, for reminding us around. The impact of the cost of living crisis affects us and many other people. And that comes to the end of these questions. If you thought that, I needed to say something that perhaps the panel can address, and I'll now hand over to Claire. And thank you very much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jennifer, as always. Okay, so this next session is where Next for Disability Equality, basically, and how we, as a trade union, us as individuals, can influence the next government. We're going to start off with Quinn Roach. Quinn's a policy officer for TUC's Equality Strategy Department, where he focuses on LGBT plus and disabled workers. He is a long-time friend of the NASUWT. I actually realised before when we were walking out that I've only ever seen him on Zoom, so it's very nice to see him in person. And we do welcome him here today. So, Quinn, can I pass over to you, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. And so we're going to talk a little bit about influencing the next government and sort of the TUC's strategy. But before we get into that, I think I'm going to open with a statement that I don't think will be a surprise for anyone in this room. The TUC has carefully analysed the last 14 years of successive Tory government policies and promises and procedures alongside Labour's proposed New Deal for working people, and we realise that the New Deal is a game changer comparatively. And why do we realise this? Well, when we look back at the last 14 years, we've seen disabled people literally die days after being assessed fit to be able to work. We have seen disabled people's benefits removed, many forced into poverty, and again, some have died, and many have had to make the decision between heating and eating. So, you know, it's, like I said, no one in this room is surprised with that statement. We've seen very little progress as well to close the disability pay gap and employment gap. And this is really quite shocking and surprising considering all this government talk about is getting disabled people into work. And beneath that kind of statement is the underlying culture war that they've been forging against this group for 14 years, that disabled people are benefit thieves and scroungers. And I'm sick of the narrative. So if I had to encapsulate the last 14 years, the Tory vision for disabled people, I would say it's narrow and uninspiring. And those are the words I use in polite audiences, with polite people. So I have other words, but I can't use them here. I think Jennifer would really upset with me. But yeah, so our focus now is on engaging with the Labour Party to kind of secure and pin down what their promises to disabled workers are. And one of their big promises is something we've been lobbying for a long period of time, which is we've been asking for disability pay gap reporting to be enshrined in legislation. And we've been asking for that to be enshrined with mandatory action plans. So actually the reporting is important, but actually how an employer is going to address any pay gaps they identify is more important. But so we've been asking for that, and the Labour government have promised in the first 100 days to bring in that legislation. And so we're engaging them to kind of underpin and explain what we need that to be. And just to kind of, in case anyone here is unfamiliar, you should know that the Tory government, again, making all this noise about getting disabled people into work, while they haven't made any change in the pay gap in the last 14 years, there's been literally no progress at all. So currently, the pay gap is 14.6% for disabled workers. That's higher than it was when records began. And if you're a disabled woman, you are paid 30% less than a non-disabled man. So that's like £3.73 an hour. So the pay gap is hugely important. I'd mentioned earlier disabled people being in poverty. This is one of the reasons disabled people are in poverty. Most disabled people work and they're paid less. And on top of that, of course, there is the additional cost of living, which I think Scope have estimated something around 9.5K for disabled people just to kind of meet their basic needs. So this is all part of the parcel. Yet Labour are promising to bring in something we've been demanding and asking for a long period of time. So we're quite happy with that. So yeah, I call that appropriate and proportionate action. Thank you, Labour Party. There are two other things that they're promising to bring in within the first 100 days that I think this group should know about. One is strengthening flexible working and making it a day one right. And I bring that here because actually one of the things we know from our research is that disabled people and disabled workers have a hard time getting flexible working as a reasonable adjustment, and bringing in this legislation will make that easier for everyone to get, and therefore also easier for disabled people to get as a reasonable adjustment. They're also promising to ban zero-hour contracts, and I raise that here again because we know disabled people are disproportionately more likely to be on a zero-hour contract. So thank you, Labour, because that is also one of the things that we have been calling for a long time and would benefit, disabled workers as a group. But those aren't the only things. Those are the big three headlines, and I don't want to take up more time than I've been allotted, but I'll try and be a bit succinct about some of the other things that we are talking to Labour about at the moment. And I should say, when I say we, I mean Paul Novak, the General Secretary, I mean our heads of department, and I literally mean me. We are engaging with them at every level to kind of flush out what their promises mean. And we're in this period of time where we need some of the detail, but we can't get all the detail. It's that fine balance between over-promising or under-promising and about what they can say. So I'm sure everyone here will understand that's the balance we're kind of trying to get right. Get enough meat on those bones so we have faith that they'll be delivered, and we do have faith, versus getting too much and then allowing the Tory party to, again, come out and have another culture war or just continue to attack Labour and disabled people, which is what they want to do. And before I get into them, I'll just say that we don't think this next election is going to be very friendly or nice or collegiate. We anticipate it being absolutely a fist fight and rolling in the mud, and I think that's where the Tory party want us to go. So we're trying to resist that as much as possible. But yeah, so the Labour Party have promised to reform access to work, and we're working to kind of unpick what that means. One of the promises they've made is to award indicative awards around access to work as a priority, and I should say one of the things the TUC is a signatory to is the Disability Employment Charter. That was approved by the TUC Disabled Workers Conference, and so we've signed up and we're really banging across that. So that's one of our big priorities. Labour have also committed to reforming job centres, reforming social care, so they want to make sure that work pays, and deliver specialist help to disabled people. And again, we're not sure, that aligns with the charter, but we're not sure exactly what all of those promises mean, so we're in discussions about that as well. Labour have said they'll strengthen access to and around reasonable adjustments. The Charter says we need to have an answer on if we're getting a reasonable adjustment or not within 2 weeks. Labour haven't quite matched that, so we're kind of working out where we are with that. And then a biggie for disabled people's organizations and the law is the UNCRPD. So TUC longstanding policy is for that to be integrated into UK law. And I think the Labour Party have made some inroads and some suggestions about, making sure it's integrated into policy, but haven't quite gone to the law yet. So we're kind of having conversations with them around what that means. And just to tag off before I end, the government disabled people strategy that came out on Tuesday also makes similar inroads around the UNCRPD. And do I have any faith that they'll do anything with it, the Tories? No. Way more faith that Labour will do something positive with it. See, I'll end it there. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the key Labour policies that we are talking to them about for disabled workers, and just to underpin some of the vastly horrible things that have happened over the last 14 years. And I do that because I hear people saying, there's not any difference between the Labour Party and the Tories. There's very little difference. And I'm like, the difference is stark and shocking. Don't believe that. So yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, Kat just made me jump out my skin. Thank you for that, Quinn. We are going to take questions later on once all the panel have spoken and introduced themselves, both from the floor and from our online delegates as well. So if you do have any questions or anything comes to mind, please just jot it down and we will come to you very shortly. I also remembered I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Claire Ward. I'm chair of our National Equal Opportunities Committee, as well as vice chair of the Training Committee, as I was introduced earlier. So hello everybody, a belated hello. I'm going to pass over now to Kat. Kat Downs, been a teacher since 2005 and has spent much of that time teaching SEND within both mainstream and special educational settings. As an activist, she's passionate about equalities, I'm sure you've heard, and often speaks around the country on issues around neurodiversity, ableism and disability. She has led projects with school and campaigns around LGBTQIA concerns and regularly speaks at TUC and NASUWT conferences. And Kat has been a member of our Disabled Teachers Advisory Committee since 2016 as well. So, Kat, please.
So 3 minutes to talk about what a changing government needs to know about disabled people is not long enough. And I'm really glad that I was worried that Quinn was going to steal what I was going to say, but it hasn't. It's going to enhance what he said, hopefully. But yes, I do sit and I look back pre-2010 and we've gone backwards so much in terms of a lot of provision. We've had cuts to disabled living allowance, we've had cuts to access to work, we've lost things like employee schemes and a lot of employment schemes that have just disappeared and been cut. We've now lost the Minister of Disability. That's obviously been demoted as well. I have high hopes for Vicky Foxcroft. I've done a lot of work with Vicky Foxcroft, but I also know there's other areas in politics where the voices of disabled people have been cut because the posts have been removed and the focus is just we don't have a voice as heard. So the first thing that change of government need to be aware of and really need to kind of understand is that nothing about us without us means that we are there in the policy making. Doesn't mean you make a policy and consult us afterwards. It means we are part of the formal policy making processes and that we are able to engage with those processes. And the people leading those need to be people with lived experiences, because at the moment they're not always. There are well-meaning charities, but they're not necessarily charities that are driven by people who've got lived experience. They also need to change this horrific narrative. I know Quinn's mentioned this demonisation of disabled people that has gone on since 2010, and it's still not, the reality is we've been in austerity since 2010. We've had the support needs that we have taken away from us. And I remember having a conversation with a councillor who was a Labour councillor around barriers to employment, and there's still this narrative that the barriers to employment is us. We need this concept of the social model disability. The barriers to employment is not us. It's not disabled people. It's not neurodivergent people. It's the fact that there is structural ableism, the fact that we can't access transport in the same way that an able-bodied person can, and it's also the fact that we can't access buildings, and that's structural ableism. Until something massively changes with our transport system, that fundamentally prevents you even getting you can't even get to work, then, you know, that is a massive problem. It's not just about getting into the workplace, it's getting to the workplace. It's getting the diagnostic systems. There are so many people who are teachers who are having to go down private assessment routes because the waiting list for neurodivergent people is up to 7 years in some areas, and then they're struggling to then get the support they need. They can't maintain the employment. Supply doesn't support them. PIP is an absolutely horrifically terrifying process that really isn't improving. And, you know, all those barriers are preventing people accessing employment, and that's where the narrative needs to change. And we still have it, you know, there's still this from some of the councillors, oh, we need to know the barriers. We can tell you the barriers. We've been telling you them for the last, oh my God, how long? And you're still not listening to us because you're still thinking that we're the barrier. So they need to be fully on board. You know, the Labour Party does adopt the social model of disability, but I'm not entirely sure that that is always really fully understood by some of the policymakers. And so that really needs to drive forward. They need to understand that PIP is not about costing them money. It's about making an equal, fair playing field. And even if you're in employment, you still have costs as a disability, you know, as a disabled person. The average single disabled person will have extra costs of an average of £500 a month compared to somebody who is non-disabled. That rises if you've got a younger member of your family, and the costs are absolutely awful. There's also issues around, you know, the support that has been, you know, the financial burden that when structures in this system, in this country fails, there are no backup systems. So when the water fails, when there's flooding, when there's electricity failure, people can't, you know, people are having to pay for their own generators to run the life support systems they need to keep themselves alive. There's been a big case, I think, in Northern Ireland about that over the last few weeks. But the fact is, we have these priority services put in place, but sometimes they are just lip service. Actually getting them to bring what you need can be really challenging. And so if you are a disabled person who's fearing for your life, you are just going to have to find that money to provide those services to make sure you've almost got those. So PIP is supposed to be there to help us fund the extra things we need to make that shortfall. And yet it's been used as a demonising process. It's been the narrative around it is that we are scroungers, you know, and all the horrific things that get said about us. It's not. It's to make this country equitable and fair, so everybody has that employment. I shouldn't have to use my entire wage to fund what I need for my disability. That is where PIP comes on. So we need to. Thank you. We need to change that whole narrative and that whole thought process around, and that is a whole countrywide thing that will take a massive thing, but that is going to make a biggest difference, I think. Anyway.
Thanks, Kat. I tell you what, you fit a lot into 3 minutes, and all very, very pertinent points, which I'm quite sure members of the on the floor here and online will be picking up in questions in a moment. We're actually going to go to somebody now who's going to join us on screen. It's Clive Bowles. He's a long-standing member and a regular contributor of the NASUWT Disabled Teachers Advisory Committee, and he brings a unique perspective to us today as a Northern Ireland member. Clive, we've all been watching with interest the current political situation in Northern Ireland, and so, Clive, what are you hoping for from the next government?
If I can sort of try again, I can't try and squeeze things into 3 minutes, yeah. Government and the political process is probably one of the most complex to solve ever, and each government we see has a rise and fall and then a boom and bust time. Each time it's glory in the election with 1 or 2 promises fulfilled. Then we get a major world event or problem and government changes or leadership changes. We saw in 86, 87 strikes, the results in Northern Ireland here, we got the Georgetown Agreement and pay and conditions, which for a long time helped and still helps in terms of the hours and the work for the year and so forth. For people with disabilities, we saw after a fight the introduction of the Disability Discrimination Act in 95, which made it a duty on employers to make reasonable adjustments for people with disabilities. This helped overcome barriers we faced in gaining and remaining employment and in accessing goods and services. But a disabled person had to be in a job in the first place or get a job, and if refused, had to go and try and find ways of talking about discrimination and getting sort of acts there. Like some of you, I have experience going through the process of being assessed with my disability and reasonable adjustments to get back into work. However, I also experienced the lack of knowledge and management of my needs as time progressed. I've watched, talked to, and listened to politicians, and my distrust of them only grows. But I also realise that we have to become like them and work in the world that they do. In Northern Ireland, we have a new Assembly and a Sinn Féin new First Minister whose party have promised more ideas to improve life in the country for all, disabled included. We've heard from the leader of the DUP that they too have promised to want to rebuild the province after stagnant 2 years. We wait with bated breath on that one. The influence that brought the so-called deal was the working people and their unions getting together and striking. So how will workers with disabilities push ourselves to the fore as regard our needs and adjustments in the school estate? Not just reasonable adjustments. It's a word I don't like because it's open to interpretation. The University of Cambridge research concluded that disabled teachers remain on the margins of a drive for greater inclusivity in schools. In particular, the study identifies the need to encourage more disabled people in teaching, highlighting the skills, knowledge, and empathy that they bring to the classroom. So how do teachers stop feeling we have to hide our disability so we have the freedom to teach and educate young people? We here in Northern Ireland have a proposed Assembly Disability Action Plan for 22 to 25, but we've lost 2 years of that with the DUP action. So how do we take it and put it back onto the fore and get it back on the agenda for us? How do we influence the policy and get devolved governments and national governments to do what we want? We have been through protest, strike, and the influence of governments through the courts and what they do to get action. We see how good research as a union gives us the ammunition to get the education authorities to realise their responsibility. We need to build relationships with the political parties so that we know our influence is strong and helps or hinders them in their new policies and manifestos. Strike while the iron's hot, get what we need and deserve in the scramble. Be ready, not just for this election, but for the ones in the future. Know what we want to influence, know who we want to influence, and know when to influence. But most of all, build relationships and networks with other organisations so we become a big, strong, influencing body. Plan our engagements and focus on propositional ideas. And take time and keep learning and keep sticking at the point until we get what we want. That's basically what I believe we should be doing, working together as a larger group and putting that pressure on governments to make sure they come at us looking for votes. Thank you.
Lovely, Clive. Thank you very much. And I think you have provoked a question online, which we will come to shortly once we've heard from Bernadetta. Bernadetta Mundy has been a long-serving member of the NASUWT since 2002. She's currently a supply teacher in Peterborough and a member of the Peterborough Association Executive and our NASUWT Disabled Teachers Advisory Committee. Bernadetta is a community activist who's been a voice in schools and the wider Peterborough community. She's a chair of Peterborough Racial Equality Council, Black History Month Committee Peterborough, and her achievements, she puts us all to shame, include the Civic Award winner of 2016, the Census 2021 Award winner for her work in Peterborough. She's a member of the Police Community Scrutiny Panel, an anti-violence and anti-knife campaigner, and has organised many events in Peterborough. So on that, Bernadetta, over to you.
In 3 minutes? Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. Yeah, I'm Bernadetta, but I blame NASUWT. When I joined, I used to be that person who never spoke. Could just look like that. Then they gave me this power. and I've got the power now to speak. I've got the voice, and this voice actually is a threat to many people, a threat to Capita when they come to me, a threat to many others in the community, the police, and everybody else. So I keep on jumping from one job to the other. I'm a supply teacher, and as a supply teacher, do I get reasonable adjustment? At times, I don't even want to talk about it because I need bread for tomorrow, so I better not say I need a swivel chair. I only say it here in NASUWT because I'll just stand so that I can get that whatever pounds I get on the day. Because if I say, oh, I need this, I need that, the following day you're told, oh, we are sorry, we don't need you for the next couple of weeks. Yet it was a long-term supply position. So I choose my word carefully when I need that bread. But why should I? Why should I have colleagues? Why should we be put in that position? It's our government, because they don't know the pain we go through. They don't know that I need that break to just take my medication. They don't know that. If I go for that break or I use the toilet for my own reasons why I know it, oh, you're skiving. You want to leave the students alone. How about me? Who thinks about me? Do you think about yourself? That's your question. Right. I want to say that that actually inspired me in Peterborough. Apart from being teaching, I thought there was a long time I've had lots of health issues, and therefore I go mainly to these health places. And to access them now, since COVID, I think COVID is still there because I still cannot access my GP. If I've got to change my medication, I think I've got to dance Zumba before I can get any medication. So, dentist, I don't know about you. The last time I saw an NHS dentist was 2 years ago. I was told I was deregistered. I didn't deregister myself, but we no longer do NHS. What do I do with my teeth when my teeth is popping out? What do I do? Do I go back what I saw in BBC, a lady using a spanner to remove her teeth or tooth? That's not where we want to be. So with poor healthcare, it's going to impact on our economy, because when you're ill, you can't go to work. And when you don't go to work, you don't get that money. Yet, even the doctors, everywhere is strike. Yesterday, I arrived here at about 9. Why? Because the trains, I don't know what was happening, lights or whatnot. But there are also strikes everywhere, in education, in housing, everything. So what are we talking about? Are we happy where we are? Are we happy with the government? I don't know. In Peterborough, we go along the street, homeless people lying down there. And not only men, now it's women, and you can even see them with their children or their dogs. Why are we having so many homeless people? Then the government says, oh, we are building. Then they build all these flats, many flats, without plan. Let them build with plans so that we can have proper, parking areas. If you're a disabled person, some of us have got to kind of, squeeze in one side. At times I will say, I'm watching my height. I don't want to eat because I'm watching my height. Because if you put a bit of height or a bit of, mass in your body, you'll be walking like this on the street. There's no pavement. There's no pavement because cars, everybody has bought a car, and you have to really squeeze between the cars and the pavement. Why? There's no proper planning, because when they're planning for the able people. Oh, then how about the disabled people getting housing? You get a disability because even through an accident, if you're not born with a disability, you are in 6th floor. You can't go there when there is no lift. Getting a house down floor is another thing. So please, colleagues, let's think about who we elect, because I'm going to elect the person who is going to look into my needs. Humane policies, not just policies to tick boxes, because I believe Tories now are ticking boxes in education. To them, it is a business. In health, it is a business. And that's my life. What about you? I'm going to choose the right person. At times, I might not go party politics. I'll choose the right person for a person who will speak and will be able to listen to me. Sorry, in 3 minutes, I can't talk much about that.
You did wonderfully, Bernadetta, thank you.
Thank you.
But I tell you something, whoever put me on to chair this panel was very brave or hoping that I'd slip up, one of the two, because I'm going to keep to the NASUWT line. On the first question we've got actually that has come in from online, I'm going to first go to Quinn and then to Clive, I think. So it's a question from Marie Sparrow. If the government doesn't change, how are you going to work with them to improve our outcomes?
All right, well, so I've been policy officer of the TUC for 7 years, and I've been working with this government, or whatever Tory-led government is at the moment, so Rishi, Liz, Theresa, David, whoever. And I worked with the DWP, I worked with Bays, business, whatever the department is called now because it changes all the time. I've engaged with ministers, I've engaged with senior civil servants, and honestly, it's like talking to someone who doesn't actually listen. I have research reports, I have polling, I have data based on the labor force survey, I've made recommendations, I've done primary research, I've listened to disabled people, I give them quotes, I give them facts, figures. Doesn't really matter, they don't want to hear it, and all I'm able to really eke out of them is breadcrumb changes, slowly but surely, and usually those only come around after there has been a major issue like a disabled person dying because they've been assessed, and they've been assessed as being fit to work, but they didn't actually make it into work. You know, like these kind of things, these media moments help drive change, but the current government do not appear to me to really value disabled people's lives in the same way they do others. And that's my honest answer. So I will continue doing what I'm doing and getting as much change as I can, but it is not going to be the transformative change that I think we really need.
Thank you, Quinn. Clive, I am coming to you. Obviously, your government has just reformed itself, restarted itself in Stormont. So, do you know how trade unions, NASUWT maybe in particular, are going to be working with the government in place in order to improve outcomes for disabled people?
I suppose in Northern Ireland, parties tend to latch on to particular causes. I know when I was down at a trade union meeting in the south of Ireland, and one of the things coming up to the election that they had was Sinn Féin hadn't been a strong party in the south of Ireland, and they latched on to particular weaknesses in the government in terms of housing and equality and poor people, and that was a big vote winner for them, and they nearly actually came to power in the south. Sinn Féin in the north has a particular overall agenda, but at the end of the day, they also connect with groups like disabled, like people with housing problems, etc. And they are working very hard in those areas. So for us, it's about connecting with them or any other party that wants to work with us, that we get our point put into them, but they also are looking to us to be the people who put them in the spotlight for what they're doing. And we have to work, as I said before, we have to network. And the bigger the group we get from all the other networks, the problem is each group works on its own instead of working as a collective. And if we get a collective, the parties will come after us. If that sounds okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Clive. Thank you very much for that input. Do we have any questions from the floor? We've got about 10 minutes or so left. So is there anything that anybody wants to ask? Lara, can you just wait for the mic, please? It's coming over.
Is this on? Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. As a supply teacher, 0-hour contract is where I'm on. And as Bernadette has said, and as Quinn said, when you don't have 18 months of any work during COVID, and when you are well, there's plenty of work, and when you're not well, you know, vice versa, right? So I just wondered on what level they understand zero-hour contracts with this government. I probably know the answer, but to actually get rid of them would be fantastic. And having worked for Quinn, I know he's a strong advocate for this, but I really wonder how far they're going to engage with us. Any government, really. I think the Labour government probably would have more of an insight. But when it's hire and firing, Colin raised the fact that we can't vote. I feel disempowered as a teacher because I can't no longer vote in what we are planning for strike action and so forth. So it's banging, and I understand the reasons why. As supply teachers, I can get people to vote, and I can make myself useful in my school by making sure that people have sent their votes back. It's the same exactly with an election. You can do the same. But what you can't do is fight for every element that we are trying to get in place. And I'm just wondering when and if they did something for zero-hour, to get rid of zero-hour contracts, do you think they would engage, whether it be Conservatives or Labour, about this, Quinn, sorry? Or do you think, I think probably Labour would be more keen to engage, to get rid of it, but also there's a lot of people, like head teachers, who are also on the boards of these agencies. And there's a lot of money behind these. There's a lot of people in communities that are behind these. And I think it's going to be a far harder job than what we think. So I'm just wondering how far your discussions have gone regarding this. Thank you.
Thanks, Lara. Quinn?
So Labour have already made a commitment to get rid of zero-hour contracts in the first 100 days. I'm not sure of the detail of that, though. So I think Labour are far more likely to engage on that, considering they're already looking at how they would do it. The current government, they could have done it 14 years ago if they wanted, but they don't. So, yeah. So, I think we'll definitely make progress if there's a government change on this hugely. And in terms of what that means in terms of regular hours or having defined hours in any contract. But I don't want to, I'm not here on behalf of the Labour Party. I'm not here to stomp for them. I'm not here to just say vote Labour. What I'm here to say is that in terms of policy and policy change for disabled people, I have faith in their offer versus what we've seen for the last 14 years.
Thanks, Quinn. I've got an interesting question that's come in online from Simon, and I'm going to go to each of our panellists for an answer on this one. Whatever the result of the next general election, 14 years of cuts and underinvestment is going to take years to turn around. What are some quick, relatively inexpensive policies the next government could pursue that would particularly benefit disabled people? So I'm going to start with you, Kat, I think.
I want a bit of time to think about it. I guess the very first one is, I think, and I honestly do think it's quick in terms of, I know that governments want to spend quite a lot of money on it, is making sure the laws around accessible housing are really a lot better than they are now. There is no accessible housing out there. Very few ground floor accommodations. And actually, when you look at access to things like disabled toilets, I've got stuck in, without wanting to, I've got twice already today I've been stuck in disabled toilets because they're not actually fit for my wheelchair, but they'll be fit for the standards that are set legally. There's also a lot of rules around people who are building new accessible properties, is when you look at them, they all say over 55s. but there is, you know, with 25% of the working age population, there's not the accommodation for us, and it is resulting in people, you know, if you're on a 6th floor flat, like Bernadetta's explained, and you need to get to work, you're not going to be able to get to work. This is what I mean about the barriers for work start, you know, right from there. That's systemic. So I guess my very quick one would be let's actually start building proper, accessible, fit-for-purpose accommodation for everybody who needs it, and making that a standard access point, because that is really really a challenge, I think, for most people. My other one would be start to go back to previously. I'm not that au fait with the NHS systems at the moment, but some way to cut the waiting lists would make a massive difference, because a lot of people are struggling to get access to what they need because they're on the waiting list for you know, lots of different things. And it's this cycle. There are lots of people being told they can't have an operation because they need to lose weight, but they can't lose weight because they've gained that weight because they're waiting for the operation. And this whole, you know, process. So bringing down waiting lists of NHS, which might not be might seem expensive, but I think in the long term is going to be more cost effective. So.
Brilliant, thank you, Kat. Bernadetta, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, a rather tough question, but I think really the government needs to go, whichever government comes in power, needs to go back into the drawing boards and see which part they really need to check. Is it housing? Is it education? Is this assessment? How many of you have gone to assessment and you, somebody like me with mobility issue, I can raise my hand. Oh, you raised your hand, therefore you failed your assessment when you're doing your PIP. Oh, you speak so well, are you really ill? So I'm being judged by somebody who doesn't know how I feel. You meet me on my good day, why should I come there and pretend? Oh, you dress well, you do your makeup, who does your makeup? You know, those silly questions are asked, and they don't know how it impacts on people. So it's not there are certain things they can do to actually help our mental well-being. And with our mental well-being, as I said, if you have good health, healthcare, then it will impact positively to your economy. Therefore, you won't have to use much, because the more they frustrate us, the more mental health kicks in and the more damage is made. I won't go to work, other people will be also affected, and then there's that long waiting list. Many places are closing, pharmacies are closing. You want to go to the nearest pharmacy, it's not there. As a disabled person, you have to either drive or get somebody to go and get your medication, or you're told Lloyd's brings it for free. They bring it, they put it behind the bin, it rains, your medication. So there has to be proper back to the drawing boards and know how can we help these people, especially disabled people? How do we help those young people who are yet to be assessed? It takes 5-year-old at times takes a whole year, they've not been assessed. Then how does that impact on the family? So it's a question that I can't just say it can be answered that way. It needs a proper planning. But they don't have time to plan because it's election. Everybody wants to jump and tick boxes. I don't want to be part of the ticking boxes. I want humane policies that will support all and include all for meaningful social mixing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadetta. Clive, I'm going to come to you next.
Yeah, a little bit of, from Cap's point of view and a little bit from Bernadette's was, Bernadette's a little bit there about PIPs and so forth. To me, especially older people with disability, PIPs and what actually classifies as a disability needs to be overhauled and reviewed, and it's a simple process if they do that. And especially as people get older, they have problems with accessibility and transport. And I'm seeing a larger number of people in disability sort of scooters or disability sort of vehicles. And they're trying to negotiate footpaths and roads and become a danger at times to themselves, because I've seen the little mobility vehicles coming down the road. They're having to find an area that has not got a lip on the footpath to get down, and then they go back onto the cycle track and then back up onto the road, and cars are flying past them. Simple little things like that for older disability people, where they can access transport and get to and fro, into town, out of town, etc., and a better sort of range or criteria for what is a disability for PIPs. I think that would be a very simple thing that they could do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Clive. And finally, Quinn.
So I've got 6 things. Meaningful engagement with the disabled people and disabled people's organizations where you actually listen and take into account what they are saying is number 1. Reasonable adjustments. I mean, I think what we're asking for is that an employer must give an answer to a request within 2 weeks. That will cost nothing. Again, disability pay gap reporting, that won't cost the government anything, maybe just employers a little bit, and if they're already doing pay gap reporting for gender, it shouldn't be too difficult. Flexible working is a day 1 right. I mentioned that earlier. I think that's incredibly important. Low cost, I think an election fund for disabled candidates to make sure that they can properly canvass. And the final one I will say is change the Equality Act, which is only for a Labour government, by the way, because I don't want the Tories to touch it. Change the Equality Act to take out the medical model of disability and integrate a social model of disability.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I've seen hands, so I'm really sorry, we are at the end of the time. So apologies if we've not got round to your question, but I would like to thank all of the panellists today. I think there's been some excellent responses to some excellent questions, and thank you for joining online as well. So Kat, Bernadetta, Clive, Quinn, thank you very much.